Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from A Man Talks NRL SuperCoach. Good morning as I enjoy a cup of tea Thursday morning just after State of Origin Game 3. Congratulations to New South Wales for winning the series, but unfortunately we weren't able to get the clean sweep. But all three games in Queensland, it's still a tremendous effort to go 2-1 up and win that series. But props to Queensland, they definitely played their best game of the series last night in Game 3. Now forget all about that. Let's get straight into the SuperCoach stuff. There's a lot of stuff to think about, particularly this week, coming straight after State of Origin Game 3. Lots of players are going to be rested. We have to keep an eye up whether players are going to be backing up. It's going to have a big implication on our team. So this week might prove to be very challenging. But let's see who should we trade in, who should we captain, and all the rest of it. And if you guys enjoy the video, as always, would really appreciate a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing to the channel as well if you haven't already. And let's get straight into it. So we'll start off with a bit of a quick wrap up of key ins and outs in terms of the team list for this week, and also some potential news coming out of State of Origin Game 3. There are a few key ins. So Fifita obviously was suspended for Game 3, so he's going to be in for the Titans, fully rested. You'd expect him to be playing 80 minutes, which is going to be fantastic for any owners, and definitely is firming up as one of the best trading targets for this week. Reid Marnie for the Eels is also in this week, so a big inclusion for them at hooker. Definitely someone we can consider for the run home potentially as a good trade-in option. For the Manly Sea Eagles, they've got a few ins and outs here. You've got Daly Cherry Evans, who's expected to back up on Friday night for his game against the Dragons, and Josh Schuster has also been named in the starting back row, which is great as an owner of his. Tom Trbojevic has already been ruled out by Des Hasler, and he won't play on Friday, so definitely factor that in for your team selection, and don't leave the captaincy on him, as a few people did last week mistakenly. For the Roosters, James Tedesco and Crichton have been named to back up, but we'll see whether they actually pull through. Angus Crichton didn't play too many minutes. He came off the bench, so I would expect Crichton to play. And the Roosters play on Saturday, so that does help their turnaround just a little bit, getting the extra day. Tedesco will depend and see how he pulls up, although, yeah, it's really hard to call, so that's definitely just something to keep an eye on Saturday team news. A big out actually out of the game is Val Holmes, who's picked up an AC joint injury in his shoulder. So definitely, if you're an owner of his, you'd want to be monitoring how long that might be for. I think NRL Physio has come out and said that's about 2 to 4 weeks. So definitely is a big blow. But he will miss the tough games against the Roosters and the Storm. So maybe that could be beneficial. But yeah, definitely is looking less of a trade-in target now that he's picked up that injury. Tyson Frizell and Dan Fifita are big inclusions for the Knights here. Frizell, that's got big implications for SuperCoach because he's now shifted onto an edge, and that's moved Mitch Barnett into the starting lock role. So we're going to probably see that bit more of that period where Connor Watson and Mitch Barnett were both sharing that lock role, and it wasn't good for neither of them, to be honest, in terms of SuperCoach. So it really is going to be a big problem seeing Frizell actually in the starting edge back row. For the Roosters, I'll just quickly touch back on them as well. Joseph Sawali has been ruled out for the season. I think it's like a loose frank injury, so he's not an option anymore for the rest of the season. Bit of a flop trading target for myself. He made about 70k, but didn't deliver that many points, so yeah, definitely in hindsight, it was a bit of a wasted trade bringing him in. And Takiaho has been ruled out for round 18, but is expected to come back in round 19. Apparently, it's just some hamstring soreness. These were the key ins and outs I wanted to go through. Val Holmes is probably the main implication in terms of State of Origin related injuries. It seems like there wasn't really anything else, but as always, really important to monitor the team news as they come in for every match 1 hour before kickoff, and maybe make sure you structure your team in a certain way as well, so that you don't get blindsided by any late outs. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Fifita is looking like a prime candidate to trade in this week. He's fully rested, no State of Origin, so he's going to be playing 80 minutes. Coming up against the Eels, he's 668k with an 82 break even. It's all lining up for him as the perfect time to get him in. He's probably bottomed out in price. Now, for myself, it actually is quite difficult to get in Fifita this week. My plan this whole time was going to be Pappenhausen was going to come back in round 18. Nico Hines was going to be my avenue to Fifita, switching by duels. Well, obviously Pappenhausen hasn't been named for the Storm, and Nico Hines is still playing at fullback. So in my eyes, Nico Hines is still a hold. While he's playing at fullback, while he's goal kicking, he's an elite centre wing option for us. So I can't actually do that Nico Hines to Fifita move. So instead, I have to reconsider and see if there's any current options I've got in my second row forward who I might be willing to trade out for Fifita. Mitch Barnett, in my opinion, is the number one candidate, given that he's now got that role where he's playing at lock, sharing it with Connor Watson. Not sure how good he's going to go, and so definitely Mitch Barnett. I think for me, if I could do the upgrade from Mitch Barnett to a Fifita, 100% would be doing that move. Ryan Madison has actually been someone I've seen thrown around as someone to trade out for a Fifita. I wouldn't really necessarily probably go the route of Madison. If you actually look back at the past few games, his minutes have been higher in the games that are actually more difficult. The Eels do have quite a tough run coming home. They've got quite a few games against good opposition like the Storm, the Panthers, the Rabbitohs. So you'd expect that Madison would actually play bigger minutes in those games. So I think he'd actually be a better option towards the back end of the season. Obviously, there are still going to be some easy games where he might not do amazingly well. But I think Madison is great depth, I think, to have in your second row forward. With 8 weeks left in the competition, probably going to see some more injuries and suspensions. So I think having some good depth is really, really important. And Ryan Madison, I think, is fine. So I probably wouldn't be doing a Ryan Madison to a Dave Fifita trade. Corey Harawira is also someone else I've seen as someone who's been talked around as potentially selling to Dave Fifita. I don't mind it as much. Corey Harawira, I only brought him in a few weeks ago myself, and that was mainly for round 17 coverage, and the draw for the Raiders at that point in time wasn't too bad. The draw is still okay for the next few weeks, but then it does get tough towards the back end of the season. But CHN has actually done pretty well in those tough games as well, scoring around 90, I think, against the Roosters. And so CHN, even him, I think he could still be very good depth. So I don't know if I'd actually trade him out to Dave Fifita. I think out of those three that I've got there, Mitch Barnett for me is definitely going to be the one who I would be trading out for Fifita. My particular case, I actually can't work with the money to go Mitch Barnett straight to Dave Fifita, and the only way I can actually do it in my team is by nuffing out one of my other good players. So in the way that my team's been set up, Christian Welch I could nuff down, and I could bring in Mitch Barnett to Dave Fifita, but I'm not so keen on nuffing out players who are going to be playing just at this point in the season. Maybe I can do that in the last kind of 4 weeks of the season, but at the moment I still think having depth is really, really important. So I personally might actually have to skip out on Dave Fifita this week, but I think if you can get him into your team, he is a perfect candidate. Tohu Harris has also been a very popular sell for Dave Fifita. Tohu Harris has actually been named on the extended bench for the Warriors, so it looks like he could be back as soon as this week, but most probably he'll be back next week. So for that reason, I'm not too keen on selling Tohu Harris for Fifita in myself. But either way, I think if you can get Fifita into your team, he is definitely a massive trade-in target for this round. I've given two other kind of more point of difference options in the back row if you can't say quite stretch up to a Dave Fifita, although I would advocate it because he's 100% the best second row forward to go for. I really like Tyson Frizell and Cam Murray as good pod second row forward options. Tyson Frizell, he is just coming back from an injury. Tough game against the Storm with 100 break even. I think you could definitely wait on him for this week, but for maybe next week, he could be a great option. Coming up against the Roosters, Raiders and the Broncos in the next 3 games, and the Knights draw for the rest of the season is also very solid post that Roosters game. And Frizell has been averaging very, very well. I think he's been averaging around 69 points a game. Playing full 80 minutes, there's no concern about his minutes. He's always going to be locked in for that role. And so I think Frizell is actually a fantastic point of difference option. Say if you weren't able to go to Fifita, you could pay 100k less and go for Frizell. Obviously though, Frizell is probably going to average a lot less than a Dave Fifita, but I really like him as an option. Cam Murray is also someone I really, really like. 516k, so he's even cheaper, about 150k cheaper than Fifita. He's got a very low break even of 12. He's one of these guys you'll have to wait and see in terms of if he does back up from State of Origin, but a really nice game against the Bulldogs. We have seen he's got like a 3-round average of about 71, and he's been able to get some attacking stats, which is what we like Cam Murray for, because that really gives him a high ceiling. And so I think Bulldogs, Warriors, Dragons, and Eels in the next month is a great run for the Rabbitohs. And he looked really impressive in State of Origin, so I'm hoping that form does now translate to his club football, and he can do really well to the back end of the season. So I really like Cam Murray as a point of difference second or forward option if you can't quite make the money work to get all the way up to a Dave Fifita. So this next section of the video, I wanted to discuss the best fullbacks to partner Tom Trbojevic for the run home. I've got 6 options here: Ryan Pappenhausen, Ponga, Clint Gutherson, James Tedesco, Latrell Mitchell, and Reece Walsh. And I've put all of their draws for the rest of the season. And on the left-hand side, I've got a key there of all the teams and how many points they concede to fullbacks in terms of ranking across all teams. And you can see there are definitely teams that are very good for targeting, like the Broncos, who are the worst team at defending fullbacks. So those are the kind of teams that you want to be looking to target with your fullback selections for the run home. This is why Kalen Ponga, in my eyes, has got the best draw for the rest of the season. The next 2 games are tough. Storm, Roosters. Obviously Roosters I think do concede quite a few points, so I don't think it's as tough of a matchup as we previously see. But Storm definitely is. But if you look at that run after the Roosters, it's in my opinion the best. You've got the Raiders, Broncos, Sharks, Bulldogs, Titans, and Broncos again. That's 2 games against the Broncos, who are the worst at defending fullbacks. You've got the Bulldogs, who do concede a lot of points. Titans as well. Raiders, they all concede a lot of points to fullbacks. This is why Ponga is so sought after, I think, from say round 20 onwards. and it is a perfect kind of switch if you've got like a Clint Gutherson like myself. As you can see there, from round 20 is when the Eels draw really does start to turn. Roosters, Rabbitohs, Manly, Cowboys is a good match, but then they finish the season with Storm and the Panthers. So Gutherson is looking like a perfect switch to a Kalen Ponga or a Ryan Papenhuyzen in, say, round 20. And that's definitely one move I'm going to be looking to do myself. If you don't want to go for like a Kalen Ponga because he isn't goal kicking, which does kind of cap his ceiling just a little bit, and it also does kind of reduce his floor. Normally goal kickers can average around 50 points pretty safely. If he doesn't have the goal kicking and in a bad match, he might only score around 30. But if you look at those runner games there, do you expect Ponga to be doing poorly? I'm not so sure. I mean, he did amazing for the Maroons, and this is a big reason why I'm so hot on him for the rest of the season. And an 88 average in his 6 games, that is one downside. He has had a very injury-affected season, and we haven't seen him put in a consistent runner game so far. But Ponga, in my eyes, is the fullback with the best draw for the rest of the season, and 100% I think is probably the number one option to partner Tom Trbojevic. Number 2, I would say, is Ryan Papenhuyzen. If he does come back and he does hit the ground running, coming back to his early season form, because with his goal kicking and the way that the Storm are accumulating points against any opposition, the draw isn't as good for the Storm as it is for, say, the Knights, but the Storm are such a better team, in my opinion, that it doesn't really matter to an extent. I mean, you've got games against the Panthers, Manly and Eels in the run home, but also games against Raiders, Titans and Sharks, Cowboys. I think there's so many points on offer there for a goal-kicking fullback, as we see with Nico Hines. So Ryan Papenhuyzen, I think, is the number 2 option for me at the fullback spot to partner Tom Trbojevic. Clint Gutherson, as I mentioned, I think he's probably, he's done very, very well, to be honest. Like 82 average, he's been very, very solid, but I think he doesn't have quite that upside of, say, like a Tom Turbo or maybe even a Ponga or a Papenhuyzen. And just looking at that draw, I think you have to play the matchups, and those matchups for the Eels are very, very tough. So in my opinion, Gutherson, I think he's very, very good for this week against the Titans, even next week against the Raiders. But round 20, I think you definitely want to be making a switch, and Ponga is looking like the perfect person to switch him to, unless you want to go for Ryan Papenhuyzen. James Tedesco is looking a bit more of like a point of difference, actually. The run home for the Roosters is a bit up and down. The next 2 weeks is really good, Cowboys and Knights. That also does depend if Tedesco does pull up against the Cowboys, this week. But the next 2 after that, pretty tough, Eels and Panthers. But then Broncos, Dragons, Rabbitohs and Raiders is not too bad. I mean, Broncos is a fantastic game. And so I think Tedesco, if you've got Tedesco and Turbo and you'll say low on trades, I think that's a fine kind of combination to run with. Tedesco, before the season, Tedesco was the guy to go for. And there's no reason to doubt him. Obviously, the Roosters haven't been quite the same machine as they have been in the past couple of seasons. But I think Tedesco, the draw is a bit up and down, but I think with his quality, I think he's still a fantastic option. I'd probably rank him 3rd behind Ponga and Papenhuyzen in my eyes. Latrell Mitchell, again, I'm not so hot on him purely just because the matchups towards the back end of that run home are a little bit tougher. The next few weeks is probably the best out of any of these guys here. Bulldogs, Warriors and Dragons in the next 3 is fantastic. It does toughen up a little bit then because you've got the Eels, Titans is okay, Panthers and Roosters are pretty tough, and then Dragons again to end the season. So Latrell is a little bit up and down. He has shown obviously amazing form throughout this season. In State of Origin, he's been an absolute gun. He's averaging 74 in SuperCoach. I think without goal kicking, it really does hamper that kind of ceiling that he's got. And so I think I really prefer like a Ponga or a Papenhuyzen to Latrell. And I think even if you've got like a Tedesco, I wouldn't be switching from Tedesco to Latrell in my eyes. I think that's a bit of a sideways move. So Latrell, I'd probably rank 4th. Now, Reece Walsh is a bit of a smoky. I don't even know where I'd rank him, to be honest, because the next 2 games are pretty tough, Panthers and the Rabbitohs. But if Reece Walsh holds that goal kicking, next to Ponga, he's probably got the 2nd best draw out of any of these fullbacks. You've got Tigers, Sharks, Bulldogs, Broncos, Raiders and Titans. There's a lot of teams that concede a lot of points to fullbacks. Bulldogs, Broncos, Raiders, Titans. That last month is amazing for the Warriors. So Reece Walsh, if he does keep that goal kicking, he could be a real smoky. But we just haven't seen enough consistency, I think, from Reece Walsh to say, I wouldn't go for Reece Walsh over a Ponga if I knew that Ponga was fit and firing and his draw is just as good as Reece Walsh. So Walsh is a bit of a smoky, but yeah, that draw is really, really tempting. So I think, you don't have to make a decision on him in the next couple of weeks, but say if you've got like a Gutherson in round 20, you could also switch to a Reece Walsh. That could even also just free up some money if you want to run with Reece Walsh for the rest of the season. And that money from, Gutherson to Reece Walsh might help you potentially in bringing back Nathan Cleary if he does come back in round 20 as the reports suggest. But yeah, I think this kind of matrix of fullbacks definitely something worthwhile to consider in terms of how you want to play it, because the fullback spot is the best deliverer of SuperCoach points. I think Ponga, in my opinion, is probably the number 1 target. Papenhuyzen probably the 2nd, I'd say Tedesco's third, Latrell fourth, and Reece Walsh is fifth. Although Reece Walsh at fifth, I think you could move him anywhere, to be honest, if you have your own opinion of him. That draw is fantastic. Just not quite sure how durable and consistent he might be for the rest of the season compared to these other guys. So we'll also just get into halfback and 5'8 options, I think, also for the run home. I have spoken quite a bit about this in the past few weeks and have been focusing a lot on the round 17 options like Sean Johnson, Cody Nikorima. Nikorima obviously had a really down game last week, scoring only 7 points, but as I highlighted with Reece Walsh, that draw for the last 5 weeks is fantastic. So I think if you're a Nikorima owner, me too, I think I'll just be persisting with him and hope that he comes good for that last 5 games of the season. Now, some other options that I've got here are Jerome Hughes, Daly Cherry Evans, Adam Doueihi, and Cam Munster. Cam Munster has kind of been not really talked about so much at 5'8", obviously because of Origin. He missed some games through injury, but I think Munster's always usually been the gun 5'8 to go for in SuperCoach. The problem I have with Munster is that he hasn't shown the ceiling of that as a lot of these other guys have. If you look at these other 3 options that I've got here compared to Munster, Munster has only turned up once so far this season. Adam Doueihi has done it twice and gone close on another occasion. Cherry Evans has already turned up 3 times, and Jerome Hughes has turned up 4 times. So I think with SuperCoach, you really want to be targeting the ceiling guys. And so for that reason, I'm not so hot on Cam Munster. He does seem to always get rested towards the back end of the season as well. I still think obviously he's not going to give you horrible scores. He's going to give you your 70s and your 80s. But I think if you're really trying to chase and get really high upside guys, I'd probably actually prefer these other 3 people. Jerome Hughes I've spoken about quite a bit so far in previous videos. I think he is a very, very good option. The only thing I would note is that first month of the season when Pappenhausen was going amazing, Jerome Hughes' scores were a little bit lower, as you can see there. 40, 36, 38, 60, 52. And basically round 6 against the Roosters was when Pappenhausen, I think, basically fell away. Jerome Hughes scored 102, but since then, his scoring has been amazing. Maybe a question mark is if Pappenhausen comes back and hits the ground running, is that going to affect Jerome Hughes? You could make an argument that also affects Cam Munster. So I think that's something to keep in mind if you are looking to bring in Jerome Hughes, but I don't think that's a big enough reason to not trade him in altogether. Cherry Evans is a great halfback option, I think, to go for, especially with that draw for Manly and that high ceiling that Cherry Evans possesses. He is a little bit inconsistent at times, but as you can see there, in the next month, Raiders, Dragons, Tigers and Sharks, pretty fantastic draw for Manly. The next couple of games after that are tough in the Storm and the Eels. But then you've got Raiders, Bulldogs and Cowboys again. So I think Cherry Evans is feasibly a great run-home halfback option. And as you can see there, he does have that really high ceiling. He doesn't even goal kick, but he can still get these massive scores because he does find the try line quite a bit. And obviously with Turbo running that Manly team all around the park, scoring multiple points, you'd expect Cherry Evans to also get in on the act. So I really, really like him as a more point of a difference halfback option. For a point of difference 5'8", I really, really like Adam Doueihi. He's been named at 5'8" again this week, and the draw for the Tigers for the rest of the season is it's crazy good actually. You've got the Broncos, Manly, which is a bit tough. Then you've got Warriors, Bulldogs, Cowboys, Sharks, Panthers in round 24, which is tough, and then the Bulldogs again in round 25. There's probably one tough game, really tough game there against the Panthers. Manly, you could also argue, but the rest of that is fantastic. And Doueihi, even in tough games, has proven to score really, really well. You can see their games against the Rabbitohs, 97, and that was him playing at centre. 45 against the Panthers playing at centre, which is not even a terrible score, coming up against the best team in the competition at that point in time. But you can see previous to that, he was consistently getting really, really nice scores. 114, 141, 83. He had one bad score against Manly of 20, but 61, 94, 84, 90. He's been very, very consistent actually so far this season. I think he's a fantastic point of difference 5'8" option. I would 100%, to be honest, going for Doueihi over a Cam Munster in my opinion. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but I really like Doueihi's draw. I really like the consistency that he's shown so far this season. He's really selfish. He always likes to run himself, which is perfect for SuperCoach. He goal kicks. I really like Doueihi as a 5'8" option and definitely a good point of difference as well. Now, one thing I will mention is Nathan Cleary has been tipped to come back in round 20. That game does coincide against the Melbourne Storm, so it is a tough game. I think maybe you want to consider if you want to be willing to bring in Nathan Cleary. I mean, he'll be, if he's got a very high break even, I think it's like 200. If he has a game where he scores 100, he'll still drop quite a bit of cash in the next couple of weeks after he comes back. And I think you have to make a decision if you do want to get Cleary for the last part of the season. But he will be very, very expensive still. You're going to probably use 2 trades to, trade out one of your, a guy with decent value down to a real cheapie, and then upgrade one of your halves to a Nathan Cleary. So I think you really have to make a decision if you do want to be bringing in Cleary in round 20. I think it's good to keep your options flexible, keep some money in the bank potentially. If there's a guy who looks like a good trade out option who could make way for Cleary but isn't an urgent sell, you might consider holding him, like something I've done with Josh Schuster. I could use Josh Schuster as a way to go to a Nathan Cleary, but to be honest, Cleary is that good of an option. Even if you have like a Sean Johnson, I would trade Sean Johnson to Cleary if Cleary comes back and he looks great. So I think just keep that in the back of your mind if you are looking to do some trades in the halfback and the 5'8 position, just in case Nathan Cleary does come back fit and firing. So the next part of the video, I'm actually just going to go through the top trade-ins and trade-outs and see, if they're viable, if they make sense or not, and hopefully that kind of covers quite a few people's thinking, as obviously these are the most common trades that people are doing. If you look at the trade-outs first on the left, Tohu Harrison, number one, really does shock me because he has been named on the extended bench. And so I think he's probable to come back this week, but most likely, in my opinion, it'll be next week. I think he's a keeper at second row forward. Unless you're trading Tohu Harris to Fifita, I wouldn't be trading him out. I think that is the most common trade, actually, Tohu Harris to Fifita. Personally, though, I think the trades are valuable. I think he's going to be very, very important for the Warriors. And so I think Harris, he actually was able to get some attacking stats to begin the season. As we saw, the draw for the Warriors is pretty good. So I think Harris could actually be getting some attacking stats for the back end of the season. So in my opinion, I'd be holding Harris if I could. And if you, I'd just try to find another way to get in Jay Fifita, in my opinion. Bailey Simonson and Joseph Swally as the number 2 and 3 trade-out targets makes perfect sense. Simonson is still out for about 3 to 4 weeks. Swally's been out for the rest of the season, so definitely very worthy in terms of selling. Jerome Luai as well is the 4th most sold player. 359k, he's so cheap. It's such little value to work with if you do sell him, but he's going to be out up until about round 20, I think, as well. And I think, as we highlighted, I think there are some good options in 5'8 and halfback if you've got the right duels. He's going to be missing the easy games in the next couple of weeks against the Warriors and then the Broncos, and he'll come back against the Melbourne Storm. So I don't see him doing really well there. So I know it's really low value, but I personally would be also trading out Jerome Luai. And as I've highlighted, there are quite a few good options. There is going to be quite a big gap in terms of money, but hopefully you're able to work that around in your team and go say like a Jerome Luai to an Adam Dewey. I think that's a fantastic 5'8 trade. Carl Lawton being traded out makes sense given that he's been relegated to the bench. He's done his job, he's made quite a bit of money, but it definitely looks like an easy sell. Nathan Cleary being sold still is surprising to me because if you've held him until this point, I think I would just hold him until round 20. It's only another couple more weeks. I think the best time to sell him was the week that he was injured because that gave you the most amount of time to use his money. But I think now that he's going to be coming back in about a couple of weeks from more reports, I don't know if I'd be necessarily trading him out myself. And I think if you've held now, just keep holding him. Takiaho being traded out, yeah, it kind of makes sense because he hasn't been that great, but he is coming back next week in round 19. And so I think with trades at a premium, and I think you're looking to consolidate your depth in your team, Takiaho for me is probably still a hold. But I mean, if you're doing like a Takiaho to a Day Fifita move, then yes, I would be doing that move 100%. He hasn't been very good so far this season, and yeah, looks an easy sell. Matt Burton, to be honest, being a sell is quite surprising. I mean, I did sell Matt Burton last week, I'll admit that, but that was also during the bye week when I thought I could capitalize and get like a Cody Nikorima. Matt Burton's next fortnight is really good, Warriors and the Broncos. So, and playing in the halves because Luai and Cleary are both out, he won't be pushed out to the centres, you would hope so. So Matt Burton being a sell is really surprising. I think he's a great hold for the next 2 weeks, and then around 20 when they come up against the Storm, he could be a perfect switch to like a Dewey or a Daly Cherry Evans, for example. So I think Matt Burton I would definitely be holding. Tavita Pangai Jr., again, it's a bit of a weird one because I think if you haven't sold him yet, you could make an argument to just hold him until he comes back. But I think a lot of people are going to be doing a Tavita Pangai to a Day Fifita trade. So I think in my eyes that makes perfect sense, and I'd probably make that switch. Josh Curran being the 10th most traded out does make sense as well. He's been named on the bench as he kind of gets eased back into the team after having that 2 week of isolation. And a Josh Curran to Day Fifita move makes perfect sense. Or even like a downgrade to a cheapie to fund the move to Day Fifita. So yeah, Curran to me, he's done his job. He's made 206k. He's an easy sell for me. Now, looking at the trade-ins, there's not too many surprises. I mean, Day Fifita as the number 1 option does not surprise me at all. Payne Haas at number 2. I mean, he had a great week last week, I think scoring about 90, was it? He did get some attacking stats in terms of a try assist and a line break assist. I brought in Payne Haas myself. I think at 492k is an exceptional value, and you should expect him to be playing additional minutes this season. For the rest of the season. Given that, Flegler was out for a little bit, Matt Lodge is out, Pat Carrigan's been gone for so long, you'd expect Payne Haas to be playing big minutes for the Broncos, and if he gets around 60 minutes, you'd expect him to be averaging around 65 to 70, so I think Payne Haas at 492k, in my eyes, is a very safe trade-in, and if you're doing like a Takiaho to a Payne Haas, that's a fantastic switch in my opinion. Taane Milne is really interesting because I've highlighted him like a couple of weeks back as a great round 17 coverage cheapie. He did amazing. He's got 131. He's now 379k, but I think he still has a minus 58 break even, so he's still going to make quite a bit of money. With that game against the Bulldogs, I don't hate the move, to be honest, because he's a second row forward center wing dual as well. So you could plug him in, if you plug him into your center wing, you could switch him around like a Ben Turbo, or you could put him in your second row forward. He could be handy depth. So I actually think it's not a bad trade-in. I do feel like a little bit is, chasing last week's points after he scored 130, but the way that the Rabbitohs are going, and he's, they do look like they're going more and more to their right-hand side, not just solely on their left edge. Milne, I think, could still profit from, scoring a couple of tries. So to be honest, I don't hate that move. And Reid Marnie at number 4 as a trade-in. He's been named to start, and I think it's a decent move in my opinion. A lot of people would be trading like a Jaden Brayley to a Reid Marnie, which to me does make sense because Brayley has fallen off a little bit, and Reid Marnie, up until his injury, was doing really, really well. I just think I'd want to give Marnie 1 week, just to see how he goes, because Jaden Brayley is doing okay, and I feel like it is a bit of a sideways move. I think I'd only be doing that move if you've got a lot of trades saved, because that, to me, it does feel a little bit sideways. Kotoni Staggs at number 5, very interesting for me. I mean, he looked amazing in his first game back, but he's actually picked up a bit of an injury, so he's actually in a bit of doubt for this week. So I wouldn't be rushing in to bring in Kotoni Staggs. After being away for so long from the game, I definitely would be waiting to see a couple of weeks to see how he pulls up. And so I think Staggs, in my opinion, shouldn't be that high on the trade-in list. The next few guys, to be honest, all make quite a bit of sense to me. You've got Zay Papali'i, best front row forward option to go for, 100% advocate that. Jerome Hughes, very, very good option, as we've spoken about already. And Alex Johnson and Cody Walker in there as well. I mean, the South's left edge is just destroying all other teams. And I think, yes, Johnson is very expensive at 751k. But to be honest, I think if you can make the money work, I would just do it because he's been on an absolute tear. And Brandon Smith as the 9th most traded in, I think he could be a very, very good option at second row forward. It seems like Harry Grant's injury just keeps persisting. And Smith has been finding the try line for fun. Really filthy I didn't jump on him about a month or 6 weeks ago when he started this really amazing run of try scoring. I think he's still a very, very good option at hooker and second row forward because he does have that dual flexibility. But I think I'd make the argument that at 654k, I would spend the extra 10-15k and go to a Fifita if, say, you don't have a Fifita already, because I think Fifita is by far a better option, in my opinion, than a Brandon Smith. Alright, so we'll touch on the vice captain and the captaincy candidates for this round. It's actually quite an open round for captaincy and vice captain, so I think this hopefully does add a bit of diversity in some of the point scoring this round. Dave Fifita and Clint Gutherson, in my opinion, are the best vice captain options for this round if you're looking for someone from the first game of the week. Fifita playing 80 minutes you'd expect and fully fit. He can easily score over 100 against any opposition, and I think against the Eels, it is a slightly tougher opposition, but I still would back in Fifita to do pretty well. Clint Gutherson, I think, is going to personally be my vice-captain option. The Titans are the 4th worst at defending fullbacks. Mitch Moses doesn't end up backing up from State of Origin because he has been named. Clint Gutherson would get the goal kicking if Moses is out, which is why I'm really hoping that Moses is not playing and Gutherson's goal kicking, because then in my opinion he's a fantastic vice-captain option, because with that goal kicking you can maybe expect another 15 to 20 points, and so if he hovers around an 80 or 90 he might then get into the 100 range. So I really like Gutherson as a vice-captain option. The next two guys, I think, are guys that you could take a punt on as either captains or safe vice-captains if you don't go for a Fifita or a Gutherson. That's James Tedesco and Nicho Hynes. Obviously, Tedesco is predicated on if he does pull up from State of Origin, but the Cowboys have been the 5th worst team at defending fullbacks, and I think Tedesco hasn't been doing so well, but he's obviously come up against tougher opposition in the Storm and the Panthers in recent weeks, and I think Tedesco could be a very, very good shout for a vice-captaincy option if you have him already. Nicho Hynes, though, I think is going to be a very popular vice-captain for a lot of people. Coming up against the Knights, they're the 9th worst at defending fullbacks, so they're not horrible, but the Storm are just so far and away the most attacking team you'd expect this season, and I think he's consistently scoring over 100, Nicho Hynes, so I think he's a very good vice-captain option as well, and maybe even a punt captaincy option. Adam Doueihi, I've kind of been really hot on him, as you can tell so far during this video. The Broncos have been the 7th worst at defending 5'8", but I really like Doueihi, the fact that he's goal kicking. So I think if you bring him in this week, it would be a real point of difference to captain him this week. Definitely if you're looking to chase ranks, or say you're losing in a head-to-head and you really need to make a big move, Adam Doueihi could be the captaincy option for you. I think what's probably going to be most people's captain, and my opinion, my captain as well, is going to be one of the South guys, Cody Walker or Alex Johnston. Cody Walker for me is looking like the very, very safe option. I mean, the Bulldogs, 4th worst at defending 5'8". The way that Cody Walker was laying on try assists last week for fun was so impressive. Him scoring 130, for me, he's essentially a lock for myself as captaincy. You could take a punt on like an Alex Johnson as well. The Bulldogs have been the worst team at defending center wings. The only problem I have with Johnson is that he just doesn't have quite that high base statistics, and so if he doesn't score the tries, you could be in for a really low score from captaincy, but I wouldn't expect that coming up against the Bulldogs. But I think the safer option is definitely a Cody Walker. So yeah, for me, vice captaincy Clint Gutherson and a captaincy Cody Walker is probably going to be the way I'm going. So we'll quickly kind of go through the break-evens as well. I've spoken quite a bit about a lot of the key targets, so I probably won't spend too much time on this section. For the Broncos, as I mentioned, Katoni Staggs is someone who's been very highly traded in. He's got a really high break-even still of, well, it's not really high, it's 53, so it's not too bad. But yeah, I wouldn't really be going with him at the moment, given that he is still coming off an injury and is potentially in doubt for this round as well. And really, I think the main guy you're looking at is Payne Haas, 33 break even, so he's very, very cheap, and he's probably going to go up in price from now on. So I think this week is a great week to bring in a Payne Haas. From the Bulldogs, to be honest, there's not really anyone I'm considering. I mean, you've got Luke Thompson has kind of fallen away in the past few weeks. So yeah, to be honest, no interest for me in the Bulldogs players. Similar to the Raiders, I think, as well. I mean, one guy who has been doing decently well is Jordan Rapana. He's got a break even of 41, so he could also be a decent kind of, more of a point of difference centering option that you want to go for as well. But I think there are still going to be a lot of other better options like your, Ruben Garrick, Alex Johnson, who are a lot higher owned. I think they're going to do a lot better job than Jordan Rapana. But if you can't quite make the money work, I think he could be a decent shout. For the Dragons, to be honest, there's no one I'm really interested in. Ben Hunt is probably the best option to go for. He did really, really well in Game 3 last night for the Queensland Maroons. He's got a break-even of -17, so he's going to be looking to make quite a bit of money. So if you're looking for a hooker to go for, maybe for the rest of the season, he's been pretty consistent, so I think you could do worse and go for a Ben Hunt. For the Sea Eagles, I think the main people that we're going to be looking at is like a Cherry Evans, your Tom Trbojevic. Obviously, Ruben Garrick has got a very high break-even of 106, so we might see him topped out in price. So if you don't jump on him this week, maybe you can get him next week when Tom Turbo is back, because the Manly Sea Eagles might not do so well this week as well without Turbo in the team. Yeah, Daly Cherry Evans is quite expensive at 685k, but he's got a 46 break even as well, so you'd actually expect that price to go up even a little bit more. So I think Cherry Evans, if you can make the money work, I think is a great trading option for this week. But just wait for confirmation that he is playing this week. They do play on the Friday, so hopefully you should get that news quite early in the round. The Melbourne Storm, I mean, the two guys who I think most people are going to be looking at in terms of when they're going to make the switch is Nico Hines and Ryan Pappenhausen. Hines has got a break-even of 105, Pappenhausen 195. Look, for me, I'm not trading Nico Hines until I see him on the bench, essentially, because he's doing that well goal kicking. I really don't think I need to make the move, even for like a day for Fifita. I'm happy to be honest, skip a day for Fifita if it means, I'm holding Hines for another week. And to be honest, that's probably the way I'm going to be playing it, and that's probably the way I'd encourage as well. So at 679k with a break-even of 45, Caleb Ponga is obviously the number one trading target out of the Knights, but this week coming up against Storm is pretty tough. He could very easily score over 45 and go up a bit in price, but I wouldn't expect his price to fluctuate too much. So I don't think he's a must trading target for this round, but definitely someone to consider from round 20 as I highlighted previously. For the Cowboys, to be honest, there's not really anyone I'm looking at too hard. I mean, Val Holmes got a high break even, but he's now going to be out potentially for the next 2 to 4 weeks. So I think he's someone we can reconsider when he does come back. Taumalola could be some good depth in your second row forward. I mean, he's got a pretty manageable break even of 30 at 484k. I feel like the time to buy him was last week when you wanted him for round 17 coverage. But I think at 484k, he still presents a very, very good value and could offer some decent depth in your second row forward. I'm personally not going to go there myself though. From the Eels, there's not too many players I think you're looking to bring in given that tough run they've got for the rest of the season. I mean, Isaiah Papali'i, in my opinion, is the number one target, and with a 32 break even, he could be potentially bottomed out at 665k. So 100%, if you haven't got him already, I would be targeting Isaiah Papali'i. Reid Miney as well has got a pretty decent break even of 41 at 465k. He could also be bottomed out. So I think again, Marnie does present good value, and it's not too much money to go from Brayley to Marnie, which I think a lot of people are doing. As I've given my thoughts on whether that move's decent already, but yeah, Reid Marnie could be bottomed out in price and could be pretty good value for the rest of the season as well. For the Panthers, I mean, I think most people are kind of familiar with the guys to go for, like your Brian To'os, etc. I think that's one thing to highlight is that Nathan Cleary's break-even is quite high at 195. So even if he does come back in round 20, he might, not do so well against the Storm, and he could be nice and cheap in, the week or two after that. So I definitely don't think there's any reason to rush him straight back into the team, and it's definitely a good opportunity to wait and see on how he goes, given that he's got such a high break-even. For the Sharks, I mean, Sharks players have had quite a bit of discussion in the past few weeks given their round 17 coverage, and they've also got a pretty good draw themselves. I think the same kind of logic still applies. Like Shaun Johnson is a decent option, although he wasn't goal kicking last week, which really was not great. I think Matt Moylan is supposed to come back in the next couple of weeks. If Matt Moylan does come back and that pushes out Braden Trindle, then hopefully Shaun Johnson does pick up the goal kicking again. So he could still be a decent option, but I don't necessarily know if I'd be trading him in now. I think I'd be probably prioritising like an Adam Dewey or a Daly Cherry Evans over a Shaun Johnson in my opinion. For the Rabbitohs, I mean, the guys that we've kind of spoken about already, Taane Milne with a minus 58 break even. Again, he's going to continue to make a lot of money now that he's got that 131 in his rolling average, so I don't actually mind him as a trade-in option. Cam Murray's got that low break even as we've discussed previously. Alex Johnson and Cody Walker have both got very manageable break even, of 32 and 37. So yeah, definitely still looking like fantastic trade-in options for those two guys as well. Roosters have got a bit of an up and down draw, so I'm not too sure if I'm going to be targeting too many of their players. I still think Dan Tupou is a great centre wing option if you didn't jump on him last week. I mean, he's basically scored around 50 points, not doing much at all. But he's got a pretty manageable break-even of 62. So I think Tupou could be bottomed out in price at 441k and could be a great centre wing option for the run home. And they've got a nice matchup against the Cowboys this week as well. The Titans, only Dave Fifita piques my interest out of the Titans. So I'm not looking to go anywhere near there. From the Warriors, I mean, you've got Cody Nikorima now. Has got an exceptionally high break-even. So if you didn't get Nikorima this last week, it could be a perfect play to wait a fortnight. He should be dropping in price quite a bit. And then if you see that in that 2 weeks, he looks like he's picked up his form again. He's picked up the goal kicking. Then in the last 5 weeks of the season, in round 20, he could be a fantastic trading option, nice and cheap, given that he's got that high break even as well. And similar approach could be done with Reece Walsh, now that he's got 103 break even. From the Tigers, I think the key guy that I mentioned was Adam Dewey. One person I really do want to touch on as well is David Nofaluma. He's got a 51 break-even and 381k. That's the cheapest I've seen Nofaluma in years. And he could be, as I mentioned, Tigers have such a nice draw for the rest of the season. I think Nofaluma could be exceptional value. Very similarly priced to Taane Milne. So you could go for a Nofaluma over a Taane Milne. And I've got Nofaluma. I've been holding him essentially because of the rest of the season draw that the Tigers have. So I think Nofaluma could be a fantastic trade-in option. Dane Laurie can kind of fit in that mold as well. At 445k with a 53 break-even. I wouldn't necessarily, I think, be trading in Dane Laurie though. I feel like it's more of a case of that if you've got Laurie, I would continue to hold, given that the Tigers draw for the rest of the season is very, very good. But yeah, Nofaluma looks like a very interesting option. He hasn't done very well so far this season, but he's so cheap. I feel like it's probably worth taking the punt, and he could be a good centre wing depth as well for you for the rest of the season. So we'll give a quick shout out on our group league. So Jason from the Avalon Storm top performed in round 17 with 908, which is actually an amazing score for round 17 in the bye week. And he's got a really nice overall rank of 130. So I think it looks like that 908 score has definitely pushed him up. And so he's doing really, really well now in the overall standings. And in terms of our overall group league top 5, we've still got Andrew Eliminators with an overall rank of 6, so he's been doing exceptionally well, and I'm still rooting for him for the rest of the season. We've got Marcelo, Jason, James, and Ben rounding up the top 5, all placed in the top 230. Shout out to Marcelo, who's in 42nd, so he's in the top 50. Jason, as we mentioned, is 130th, so these guys are all doing really well. If you guys want to join the group code, it's 286239. But yeah, hopefully you top 5 can continue your strong form for the rest of the season. Well, that's it guys, that is the round 18 trade targets and preview. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Do leave any comments below and any additional questions of players that I weren't able to get to. And if you enjoyed the video, as always, really appreciate a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.